want to thank our sponsors.
JustForPolice.com, a grassroots service reward program established for police officers buying and selling real estate. Jiu-jitsu50.com, a lifestyle brand training resource for law enforcement officers, providing technique videos, blog articles, promoted courses, and the latest in apparel and gear. Jiu-jitsu50.com. Storm Training and Consulting, offering courses in firearms, tactical emergency medicine, and the Tactical Rescue Challenge. Stormtraining.org. Manchester Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, aka Bushido, located in Manchester, Connecticut, a staple in the jiu-jitsu community for over 20 years. ManchesterBJJ.com.
I'm all adrenalized right now.
So without further ado, we got episode 15 of the Code Podcast with Greg Nelson. I don't think you need too much of an introduction to the mixed martial arts and grappling world, but it's an honor to talk to you, sir. How's everything going? I know you just had a little excitement in your life a few minutes ago, but
yeah, other than that, everything's going very, as it's going, right? We're all kind of walking in the same path right now.
Yeah, this whole COVID thing. I got to say, is that the same room where I saw you pull a single leg and a pull guard on a vacuum cleaner recently?
Exactly. This is the Rona gym.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone pull guard and triangle a vacuum in my entire life.
That's right. Hey, desperate times, desperate measures.
And then you had your training dummy sneaking up on you. I saw that one too.
Yeah. Hey, and let the creative juices flow.
So one of our first questions because we have listeners from two realms basically. We have listeners from the law enforcement world, hence the Thin Blue Line Code, and then we have listeners from the martial arts world, hence the Bushido Code. Which, it's kind of like half and half of my life. So that's one of the main questions we ask is, how did you get involved in martial arts? When did it all start for you? Kind of what was your martial arts journey? Because I know yours, 40 plus years, all kinds of different martial arts. Obviously a Division I wrestler at one point. Quite a resume of martial arts. How did you get into this?
Well, kind of grew. It almost just kind of grew into it. I always say my first instructor or teacher was my older brother, who was 6 years older than me, and that's where I truly needed self-defense. And so he was, but then he also, did some boxing and some taekwondo. So that kind of just fed into the mix. And of course, back in the 70s, I mean, ninjas were all the thing. So was all into that, growing up into that part of the stuff and just working in. And then in 1976, that's when I started wrestling when I was around 10. And then from there, just kept on going martial arts into, more boxing and taekwondo. And then I met some friends and we just started training, and they were doing actually going into martial arts classes where I was wrestling, but I also boxed. And so we just started mixing it all together. And then we started getting a little bit more organized, a little bit more formalized. And then growing up, I never really saw a difference in the martial arts and wrestling and sports. To me, it was all just one way to get better. At that time, for me, I wanted to be able to fight better. And so it was all being able to fight better, and it was all giving me strength and attributes that I needed. And I just saw it all as one thing. And I was really starting to get into the kickboxing and boxing, and we were sparring in the yards, and we'd have what we call free sparring, which meant everything. And they didn't know how to wrestle, so it was always really easy. So I just take them down right away. And so they're like, okay, no more of that. We're just doing kickboxing now. And so then we just do that. And then in 1983 is when I met Rick Fay and started doing Filipino martial arts and the Jianfan martial arts. And then shortly after that, Thai boxing, because I met Achan Chai in 1984, and Guru Dan at that time too. And so that's when, for me, I would have to say, that's when it was like the dream come true. I started seeing all this stuff I was reading about in books and meeting the people that I was reading about in books. And it was just like, no. And then I just went full out. And it was like, to me, like I said, I was still wrestling. That's what 83 is when I graduated from high school. So I was going into the University of Minnesota. So I was wrestling there, but at the same time I was training martial arts, and I was training with Rick, and then I was wrestling. And to me, it was all just one big happy training session. And that's where it all began.
So how did jiu-jitsu trickle into this?
Well, at first we were just doing submission wrestling, right? And the history, I knew Eric Paulson before we knew we did martial arts. He was a gymnast. I was a gymnast in high school, and he went to a different high school than I did. And so then one day we were training, and Rick Fay and I were sparring, and he tells a story. It's probably pretty close to what he says, though. We were sparring, and all of a sudden we hear a knock on the door, and he's there, and I open the door, and I go, "We'll be done in a second." Slammed the door in his face, and he sat out there. And then he came in, and he was, he did judo and stuff. And he started training with Rick Fay at that time, with the Jean Fan and all that. And then he eventually moved out to California. And then he started training with Larry Hartzell and Yuri Nakamura with the Bushido. But he was also in the original Gracie Garage with Horian. And so in 1989, I went out there, and that was when I first did my very first jiu-jitsu private with Eric in his garage. And then I did 2 privates with Hickson. And no gi, he didn't care, gi or no gi. It was at the old Pico Boulevard Academy in Santa Monica, I believe it was. And so at that point, I was like, man, I don't think I know anything. I'm useless. It was the craziest experience ever. But after that, that's when I started really getting into, exploring more of the jiu-jitsu. But it still wasn't. This is 1990, so there was still really no place to do it. And so I got like a judo gi. And then I remember I was assisting Frank Cucci, because we knew each other from Thai boxing and Jean Fan martial arts and stuff. And I assisted him he was doing what do you call the Delta SEAL training camp for like really rich, like people, dentists.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the TR.
So they try out what the training's like.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I assisted him, and that was like 1993 or 4 or something like that. And then I went to, and he said, why don't you go see, since we're right out here, Cesar Gracie, because it was out in California. So I went to Cesar school, and Cesar and Health were still together, I think, at that point. And that's when I came back and said, okay, everybody, we're getting the gis on. And that's shortly thereafter, I went out to Frank's school in Virginia Beach when it was still FDC Academy. And I was there for a whole week. And coincidentally, Professor Pedro Sauer was there that week. And so that's where it all began with Professor. And at that point, I was like, okay, I trained with, Hickson. I trained with Caesar. I trained with a little bit with Henzo in a seminar. And then trained with Professor Sauer. It was like, he was so methodical on how he broke things down. And I would do it one way, and then he'd say, oh, you're a little taller. You're going to have to make an extra move here. And I was like, God, no one ever broke it down like this. And so I was like, okay, this is the dude I'm sticking with right here. This is the guy. And never left. Been there ever since.
Now, you were the first black belt for him, right?
Yes. And there's kind of, I always say that, obviously I wrestled since I was a little kid, since the 70s, and then doing the submission wrestling and the Bushido, and then started doing the jiu-jitsu, and actually was introduced by, Frank Cucci, and I went out to Salt Lake City, and I trained out there when he had a school out in State Street out there, and stayed out in Orem. And that's a whole nother story, because I didn't know that nothing was open on Sundays or anything. I'm like, what's going on here? It's like a ghost town. Exactly. And so, and then years went by, went up the belts. And then it was basically in 2001 and in 2002 is when I kind of was diagnosed with cancer. And I was a brown belt at the time. And so it was pretty grim at that point. They didn't know what was going on or if I was going to make it. So then he said, okay, you're going to work your black belt. It was like that thing, it's like give you motivation and give you fight to keep going. And just that energy to keep battling. And it was like, to me, that was great. And so he's always to that point, like, this is my first black belt right here, Greg Nelson.
He's told me the story a bunch of times.
Yeah,
When he comes up here, and he always likes to stay. I think he does it everywhere. He stays at our houses. He stays at my house and just sit around and talk for hours. And you come up a lot. So
yeah, he's fantastic.
Now you have quite an amazing story on that end, and you're a survivor 2 times from cancer. Is that correct?
Yes. The first one, I was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer. So I had tumors on both lobes of my liver, on my spleen, and kidney involvement. So it was all on my lymph nodes. So everything was swollen. And I remember when I didn't know what it was, right? I was just getting sicker. I was only 37 years old. So the doctors didn't think it was cancer either. So they're giving me every test other than. So I'd keep going back and get medicine, didn't work, come back. And I was getting weaker and weaker and weaker to the point where I'd have to show a move. And then I'd go sit down and almost just like, catch my breath. And then finally, my wife at that time called the doctor and said, listen, I don't know what you guys are doing, but he needs a scan. And so later that afternoon, I got a scan. And then a few hours later, they said, okay, go to the hospital. And so I went to the hospital and I figured, oh, they must have found something. So, okay. And I remember getting off the elevator and the first thing I saw was oncology. And so I go, oh, okay, so maybe I got cancer. And it was a weird thing because when it went in, I got a biopsy of my liver just to make no doubt about it. And they said, they have a cancer in there, and there's 2 tumors, and we got stage 4 liver cancer. And to me, it was like, it was a relief because not knowing was far worse than knowing. And so I go, okay, now I have something to fight. Now I know what to put my mind towards. And I told the doctors, and I remember telling my wife at the time, hey, I don't want to hear numbers. I don't want to hear statistics. I don't want to hear none of that stuff because that brings in people that it was too late. They gave up. They were too old. I'm not none of that. I'm just tell me what we got to do to fight this and let's go at it. And then I went into 6 months of chemo and was right back down to my wrestling weight, 134 pounds. I mean, it was like, getting down there. And to me, it was like, okay, I've been tired before. This is, that's how I always looked at it. I've been really tired before. I know what it's like to feel hungry, So I always say that all the training that I did, all the hard work in Thai boxing and wrestling and all the fighting was all like a preparation. It was all training for dealing with the battle of cancer. Well, one into remission after 6 months of chemo, and they're like, wow, this is crazy. This is awesome. And then I started getting all this pain in my legs. And slowly but surely, I started losing my ability to walk or do anything with my legs. And they kept on doing scans and blood work, and nothing was showing up. And they didn't know what was going on. So I ended up going down, and the pain was increasing to the point where I had a little fanny pack on, and they had a PCA that was pumping morphine into my, every 15 minutes would give me a shot of morphine, and it was still not, dealing with the pain that was there because it was just killing me. And so we ended up going down to Rochester Mayo and basically walked in there one day and after my meetings and talking to the doctors, and I had to go back through the emergency room because the pain was so bad, and was there for months on end, didn't leave. Once I went in, I stayed at Rochester Mayo Hospital for 4 months, and they didn't know what was going on. They just said, okay, we'll just keep them as comfortable as we can until we can figure this out. And morphine stopped working. The guys would come in, and I'd stop breathing, and they'd have to get me to breathe again. And then they'd take me off the morphine because then that was obviously lowering my heart rate down super bad. And they put me on 48-hour ketamine drips and then that was kind of the roller coaster. And then they finally did a high-powered MRI imaging, a new thing that they were doing. And they found that my left sciatic nerve was bigger and brighter than my right one. So they went in and they did a biopsy of my serial nerve down by my ankle, and that didn't show anything. So then they did a biopsy of my sciatic nerve. And there was like one peripheral neurosurgeon that was there that would do it. and another one that was looking, and they found that the lymphoma had drifted into my nervous system. And so they go, well, found what it is, which is called neurolymphomatosis. And I said, okay, just tell me what we got to do. And that's what they did. But they told my wife, they go, well, we know what it is. It's neurolymphomatosis. We know of 33 known cases. 32 we found post-mortem, and the 33rd person died. So there's been 0 survivors to date.
Oh, man.
And so that was kind of the deal. So once they found it, they said, we have one option. That's a full body stem cell transplant. And that was pretty new back then, 2002 to the beginning of 2003. And so I ended up going through a bunch of chemo again. And at first they take out, since I didn't have a bloodborne cancer, they could take the stem cells out of my blood. So they got, 5 million stem cells, whatever. And then they bombard me with chemo, and then they come back, and then they just reintroduce all that. And they say, here's what happens. Either you turn the computer on and the screen's blue, and we just say, well, we tried it. We did what we could. Or the computer comes back on. We won't know until after the introduction of the stem cells. And so it was amazing because I was 100% invalid at that point. Couldn't move my legs, couldn't do anything. And within about 2 or 3 days, I was kind of like a newborn deer, getting up on my feet and kind of fighting to wander. And then I had to relearn how to walk again and do the whole parallel bars and walkers and canes. And it took about a full year to be able to walk without a cane. And so.
What was that like mentally for someone that was so physically active and a Division I athlete? I mean, that's got to be just, how does that not kill your spirit? You know what I mean?
Well, you're just in a battle. You don't have time to really think about anything else. And at that point in time, my son was 2 and my daughter was 5. So they were just like young. And so I had a lot of fight, and you're just dealing with pain. You're not really thinking. I tell people this, it was probably obviously the worst time of your life because you're dealing with so much pain and so much, it's just like agony 24/7. If you're awake, it's just pain. It just feels like you're on fire. And in fact, the doctors at Mayo said that it was worse than our burn units because it didn't go away for months on months and months on months on end. And the morphine wasn't working, and then they'd switch me to Dilaudid and then the ketamine and then back to, so it was just a constant battle. But I also say that you're so focused on one thing that all other cares in the world are just gone. You don't think about bank accounts. You don't think about this. It's just you have one focus, and that's just the fight for this minute and then the next minute and then the next minute. And so it gives you an extremely different perspective. So there is no thought about jiu-jitsu or training or anything because you're in the middle of a battle. You're in the middle of a fight. And so that's all you're doing. You're woke up. You're dealing with these negative thoughts. So you're fighting those, and then you're fighting with the pain, and you're fighting with, trying to eat and all these other things. And so it becomes, I just looked at it as another fight that I was going through. And, it's just like getting through every minute by minute. So it's a different thought process, because you don't have anything, you don't get to think about that other stuff, so coming back, that was more frustrating because I had to relearn how to do. I always tell people this, before cancer, collegiate wrestler, all-American gymnast, everything I did, was I would be able to see something and just do it. It was very easy for me. Afterwards, I remember getting on the mat and I went to do a shrimp, and, your feet move, but you don't. I go, oh my God, I'm that guy. I'm the guy I used to make fun of. And it was like starting all over. And it was a crazy trip. And obviously my muscles had a memory. And so they would start to remember faster. So I got things back probably quicker than, other people. But still, my left foot, to this day, I don't have any sensory nerves on the bottom of it. And I can't hook. But nobody knows when I grapple because you adapt. And I remember Jean-Jacques Machado said, remember, you don't change for jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu changes for you. And so you modify, and people have no clue that I can't do a hook with my left foot. How important are hooks in jiu-jitsu?
Huge.
Yeah,
pretty,
huge.
pretty important. But I can push with my other foot, and I drive my shin onto it, and so I learn to hook with my other leg, and you just adapt and you modify, and the jiu-jitsu starts to figure out how to work for you.
Now, was it after that or before that that you started your academy?
Oh, it was before that. I started my academy in 1992. So, initially it was all about fighting. We were a bunch of guys that just wanted to fight. So we were training Muay Thai, we were training, whatever we could. And that was the first things we fought in was Thai boxing. And then Shudo came along, and then we got the Shudo, and then the MMA, no holds barred came along. Because at that point when we were doing it, you could headbutt, everything was legal still. No weight classes in some of the places we went, so it was pretty crazy. But then it slowly went into mixed martial art, MMA. But at the same time, we were starting to think, well, we'd get people coming in that were regular students. And at first, it was like our trial program used to be like, okay, if you can figure out how to survive the first week, you're probably good to go. So we would gravitate towards pretty tough athletes that would come in that were able to hang. And then we're like, okay, I think we could be able to, modify classes so we could get other people in here too. Cause a lot of people that were just never would want to compete, just wanted to do martial arts because they thought it was cool. But very few could deal with it, could survive it, because it was just like, it was a lot of really tough guys. So we started to create a little bit of a curriculum to a little bit more of a ramp so that people could train, and our school started to grow, and then started to meet more people. And Frank Cucci was a big help with that, because he was going through the same thing, and he was working with Ernie Reyes Jr. and Senior out in California, and they were kind of streamlining them and showing them this is how Taekwondo school works. And Frank was like, well, we'll do the same process of Taekwondo, but we just have different numbers that we're putting in this formula, And so that's kind of how, I started to adapt our curriculum as well. And so we had our regular classes, and then we had our fighter training classes. And that just kind of kept growing, and we started to streamline that and figure out more things and how to make it more available. And then 2001 is when I started kind of running into I remember I was running up in Thailand, up a hill, and I was an endurance-based athlete. I could run and run and run. And I was there with one of my fighters, and we run up this hill, and I go, oh man, I got to stop for a second. He goes, what? I go, yeah, it's my ankle. Something wrong with my ankle. I don't know. It's weird. And I was like, I'll catch up with you. Just keep running. So I'd walk, and then I'd finish my run. And then I just didn't really think about it, because you're just training then. And then getting back, that's when the decline started to slowly happen. And I still remember this, because Professor Sauer was there, and live grappling was about to happen. I was like, you know what? This is probably going to sit this one out and feel too good. And he was like, really? Because back then it was just about, it was go time all the time. Yep. And that was probably one of the last times I really live grapple, or was the first time I can remember not live grappling, and then, dealing with what I had to deal with. And then my guys, I was very, very fortunate to have just a bunch of guys that are not only really trusted friends, but they're good martial artists, and they were there, and they kept the school running the whole time I was in the hospital, and kept everything running, teaching all the classes, doing what they had to do, and organizing things. And, my wife would keep them abreast of what was going on, and they would come and visit. But it was having a group of guys that were there through thick and thin, and through potential life or death, and never bail. Man, that was huge.
Now, what was it like after you started to improve and got better and able to get back to training? Were you super reinvigorated to take the world by storm, or did you just kind of slow into it?
Slow, because I was still on a lot of pain meds, still on a bunch of, oxycodone and everything else, because, even though the cancer was gone, it was affected, and they had to biopsy my sciatic nerve, and there was damage from the cancer in my sciatic nerve. And so I was doing that, and I was slowly getting off that, but then I was on methadone. And so they would always call it the methadose, because I'd be speaking, and I'd be like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go right to here and then grab the collar. And they said I'd stop in the middle of a sentence and right in the middle of the sentence, right where I stepped off, I would just start right up like nothing. And they were going, oh, yeah, it's the methadose. He's in the methadose. And so it was like a weird thing. So I slowly but surely would, obviously coming off of those things, which was a weird trip, because when you're dealing with pain, you don't want to deal with pain. You don't want to have pain. It's just endless, right? It's just, even then it was just like there. And the doctors never seem to do anything to get you off it. They just keep prescribing. So I ended up going out of my pocket and going to a pain clinic. And they started saying, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this and that and have you do this instead and increase that, but decrease that. And then I started to self-wean myself off, because I'm going, okay, they said they do this, and I'm going to take that off. And pretty soon I was 100% off. I'm like, son of a gun. I could have probably done this 5 years ago or more, so I was kind of irritated. But even though that was going on, I was still training pretty hard. But, it was just like, you always have this thing in the back of your mind, like you always got to make sure you're taking your meds and this and that. And then the guys would tell you, it was like night and day. It was like all of a sudden, it was like you had more energy, and you were, what wasn't irritable. It was just like a flip, and it's like that was it. And it was like, oh, the old Greg's back. Here we are. Here we go.
Now, how did you bring like the mentality of everything that you went through? How do you bring that into your camps and your training and put that into your fighters?
It's kind of funny, because when they're into a position where they think they're working really hard, and I go, you don't really know what fatigue is yet. It's not quite there. And they're like, all right, we got you. And then they'll keep kind of pushing through. But what really was also a blessing was having Sean Shirk as a fighter, because he was a cardio machine. But he wasn't always one. He had to become that, because he was a fast twitch, quick, like mesomorph, right? And so I remember he got tired in one fight and said, never again. And that's when he went off and just really started to get into the fitness thing. And so he had already laid basically the template. Here's what you got to do. If you want to be a champion, we have a guy that was got third once and maybe fourth once in the state of Minnesota in wrestling. One of the most prolific takedown artists, and still to this day, he's number 2 for the most takedowns ever in a UFC fight with 21. And so, that's 10 plus years after he fought. But he just was such a creature of habit and just a conditioning, monster, that his thing was, man, I got to be faster and more conditioned, because everybody's bigger. Because the first 35 fights that he had, there was no 155. It was only 170. And so he was 5'6 3/4. He's always like 3/4. I'm closer to 5'7", right? But you're going against guys that are coming down from 200 some pounds. And so he was trying to do everything he could to gain weight, and he said it was worse trying to gain weight than it was cutting down, because every single day you just got to keep eating, and you're just like, because he trained so much that he had to just keep eating and eating. And so he was kind of the example. And Dave Monet was also one. He was the first 185-pound UFC champion, and he was also just an animal. And so you had these guys that go, hey, in your own gym, guys that are walking around here will tell you straight up, here's what you got to do. And I remember with Shirk was a great example of having just a streamlined mentality and just focused. Because I had always asked him, I say, Sean, you should probably test for your blue belt. And he goes, nope, I care about one belt and it's made out of gold. So I always say he was the toughest 4-stripe white belt to ever go through the academy. And guys would come in really, really good jiu-jitsu guys, brown belts, even black belts, and they're just like, why does that guy have a white belt on? This is ridiculous.
I remember watching his
he
guard
won't test.
I remember watching his guard passing in one of his UFC title fights, and I was like, it moved exactly like a black belt, just the way he was passing and the pressure. Just
We always say this. We have this argument. Everyone's, some of us will say, well, Sean had one. Some guys would say, well, he had one really good pass. I said, yeah, he had one good pass, but he had like 3 or 4 options, and you couldn't stop him because he just knew where he was going to be. And as soon as he opened his legs, he was so fast, and his feet were like another set of arms, just like and everything was so methodical. And he would train and train, and he was never one of those guys that would be afraid of doing one thing a gazillion times. I mean, his double leg takedown, he wrestled since he's 5, but he never stopped drilling it. He never stopped training it. He just got better with hiding it behind his strikes, and he would find all these different ways to train. And I always tell people this, and this is a great one for the new fighters as well, and the guys who want to be really good. I said, for his nighttime practices, he'd always go to different people, and he'd say, hey, Rob, do you want to come and train tonight? And, oh, yeah, I'll be there. And then he'd go to the next person, hey, you want to come train tonight? And so he'd write down a workout for one. All the people he asked would show up. He would write down a workout for one. Only one of them would show up. And then he'd write down the workout for one. None of them would show up. Because they all realize they're going to have to keep up with his pace. And so a lot of times, I got something going on, and they wouldn't show up. And he wouldn't be like, oh, geez, that's it. Nope, he'd look at the clock, and he'd say, oh, 7 o'clock, 7:05, and he'd start setting up his stuff for solo training. Never miss a beat. Never thought anything else. He already planned for it. It was already in his training, already in his mindset that if no one showed up, this is what I'm doing, and he's going to do it full out. And that's why he just had that mentality of never stopping and never giving up. It was great.
Now, how did you get hooked up with Brock Lesnar?
Well, Brock came in, and he was wanting to get into fight. And so he had asked around and found out that I wrestled at the U2. So there was a connection there. And so he came in with one of his trainers, and I knew him because I did Greco with him. And so we started talking, and I said, and he was pretty straight up. He goes, okay, I know how to wrestle, and I'm in great shape, but I'm kind of a blank page when it comes to the other stuff. What can we do? I said, well, I can fill that in. And so he was like, okay. And once that, it was basically that's what the meeting was. And he came in, and we started training, and he was just like a kind of a sponge. He really was when it came to ground stuff, because there's a lot of it was in the WWE, but they do it a little bit. They just don't do it to the point where anything hurts. I go, yeah, now you can pull the arm off. It doesn't matter. Oh, okay. And so he was so athletic too. And, he almost, I think when he did the football, when he tried out for football for the Vikings at that point, he had almost broken the combine record. He was just short on a few reps on the bench press. He had like a 38-inch vertical jump, a 10-foot broad jump, 4.6 or 4.7 40 at 320 pounds. I think they do 225, and I think he did it like 47 times in 2 minutes, whereas the record is 52. I mean, it's just insane, right? And he could just do pull-ups. He put a weighted vest on and still do like 20 pull-ups. And it was just like go, 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 go. And it was really interesting because he was very in tune to his body too. So he could tell, it's like, hey, I know we had planned for going for super too hard practices today, but you know what? We'll do the hard one, and what's this drill tonight? And nobody bad an eye, because it wasn't like he was pushing out because the dude was an animal. And he would come in, and Marty Morgan was kind of like the main coach, and that was his coach in wrestling because he knew his voice. And Marty was also, he boxed, his brothers boxed. I wrestled with Marty's brother, Gordy Morgan, who was an All-American and Olympian in Greco. And that family's just another kind of a wrestling legendary family. Their brother, John Morgan, the older wrestler brother, was a national champion for North Dakota and Olympian. Then I wrestled with Gordy, who was an All-American and Olympian in Greco. Then Marty was an undefeated NCAA national champion and lost in the last few seconds to why am I spacing on his name, to make the Olympic spot in 92. So, I mean, all of them were just stellar. Their two older brothers both fought for world titles in boxing. One of them fought Marvin Hagler. And so this was the family, and their dad was a boxing coach and a catch wrestler. And their uncle was Red Bastone, who was a famous catch wrestler. And so it was like tailor-made, to be there. And so it was, he knew his voice. And Marty's also like a Yoda when it comes to wrestling. Just, multiple time All-American, Division II national champion, Division I national champion, the coach for the University of Minnesota, or the assistant coach behind J-Rob for 17 years. And so having that source of wrestling information was also great. And he was really into the grappling and wanted to, and then we brought Caprito in, Caprito Rodriguez, two-time absolute world champion. And he was wanting to know more about wrestling, and it was funny. There, time for a great story. Caprito, if you know Caprito, Caprito means lanky one. He's tall, lanky, doesn't look like he's ever really lifted a weight in his life, because I don't think he has. But he's really great at jiu-jitsu, right? Very bendy, like a snake. And we had one guy that was a Brazilian national champion, like 260 pounds. Brock ran through him like butter. The guy couldn't keep up with him. So then we got another guy from Canada who was a really good jiu-jitsu guy, about 250 pounds. Couldn't keep up. I mean, it's too fast. Without the gi, it was just like, they were just like lost. So we're like, geez, who are we going to get? And one of the guys go, what about Caprito? And I was thinking, well, geez, what's he, about 230? Maybe? Okay. But he's two-time absolute world champion. He's good. So I remember he comes to the academy and Brock's there getting ready. And Caprito walks up to me and he's kind of slumping over how he kind of has a stance. He's tall, skinny. I'm talking to Brock. And all of a sudden Brock goes, well, where's the guy? And I go, oh, it's right here. It's a Caprito. And he looks over at him. He goes, oh, glad to meet you. But you could kind of see like, really? Okay. So they went off in the other room. I said, go work with Caprito. He's going to work with you. And I'll be over here. And so then about 20, 25 minutes later, Brock runs back and goes, Greg, he's making me do all these weird drills. And I go, Brock, he knows you know how to wrestle. He wants to know where your jiu-jitsu is. If you have any is he going to go live? I go, yeah, he's going to go live. Don't worry about it. Okay. And he runs back. And about 20 minutes later, he comes running back and he is beat red and he used to sweat like nothing you'd ever seen before. And he comes back and he goes, this guy's tying me up in knots. We're keeping him. And he runs back into the other room. And he wanted that guy that could kick his ass. He didn't want some guy he could beat.
That's how you know he's going to be a champion.
Yeah. And it was so funny. And I go in there and I look down and Caprito's got him like in a triangle, but Brock is like twisting him like a slinky. And and all of a sudden, and he goes, damn it, I can't believe he caught me. But that's how it was. And Caprito was like, well, he's never going to grapple in a grappling competition, but I am. So if I got this guy, who's going to be like this guy that I'm grappling? And so he would show him everything and share. And so it was really a cool kind of unique camp to have all those guys, and plus bringing in the wrestlers that we did and Pat Barry and all these guys it was just tailor-made, which he could do because he was really wealthy from wrestling. WWE.
So that must have been an incredible experience you were with him at UFC 100, weren't you?
Yep, 100, 200. So I was with him from his first fight where he fought in the outdoor stadium at UCLA against this Korean guy from, he was a bronze medalist in Olympics in judo. He just smashed that dude. And then his first fight, you know, coming in, he had Mir pretty quick there, and it was like he had
Keith Haring, he crushed.
Haring, he just smashed, and that was in Minneapolis. So we had he fought there, and that was a funny fight because before the fight, Keith Haring's group was yelling, "This ain't WWE, this is the real deal," and they were yelling, and they had no idea what they got themselves into. And
he absolutely ran through him.
Yep. And that was that's a lot of fight experience. And he just he killed him.
Well, what was it? It was 5 fights to go from 0 to the belt, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, pretty fast. And then he lost to to Mir, and that was a weird fight because he thought he won when they first stopped it, and then they bring his hand up, and he's like, "That's it." And then they go 1 point, 1 point. He's like, "What's going on?" And then he got caught in the knee bar, which we knew Mir was going to do it, and so we trained a lot about it. And so then after that, said never again. And so then 5 more times.
Can I ask you something about that?
Yeah.
I've always been curious about that Mir fight because it always looked weird to me because he caught him in the knee bar, and like Brock tapped. He looked at the ref. He tapped, and the ref didn't stop it yet.
He tapped again and again, like a bunch of times.
I was like,
yeah.
I always thought that was super odd, like how he let it go for so long. He tapped like 5 times probably, but in 2 different sections.
Yep. And it was funny because if you watch the beginning part, he's hitting Frank, and Frank turns his head away and hits him in the back of the head. And so it was a weird thing. Yeah, obviously they weren't sure what Brock was, but everybody knew Frank. And so, yeah, it was odd. So that after that, they were like, wait a minute, he actually almost just beat Frank Mir. So this guy's real.
Yeah.
And so that was then the other fights came, and then the next fight was that was a fun one to train for because I brought one right back to something Larry Hartzell showed me in the 80s, which was that whole stock series. And that's all we trained for that fight. It was literally, we're going to get on top, we're going to hit the stock, and we're just going to hit from there. And we had options off of that. And it's literally that whole fight was basically get him on the ground and just got him in that stock, and couldn't stop it. And then here's another great little tidbit about that. Remember after that fight, before that, Marty Morgan was like, hey, win or lose, but win like a champion, lose like a champion. Okay, no problem. So we're in there, the fight gets over, and he's for the first maybe few seconds, everything's good to go. And then Frank Mir gets up and he starts kind of wandering, like he's like staggering because he gets up. He staggers into Brock's periphery, and all of a sudden Brock just goes, ugh! And then that's when that whole thing goes off, and all of a sudden Marty looks at him and he goes, oh no, we lost him. And then that's when it goes off into the whole thing, and he's frothing at the mouth, and he's Frank Mir, blah, blah, blah. And he walks past us, and this is in front of the whole crowd. He's he walks past Marty and he goes, suckers. And he just goes right back into it. And then we walk right out. And as soon as we get out of the view of any of the fans, he's just like, all right, let's go get a beer.
Just turn it up like that, huh?
It was all a show. It was all part of the act.
That's crazy. Now, what a question I want to ask you. You've been obviously involved in the UFC with 3 different champions and all the different fighters that you've trained and stuff. What is it like the energy as it leads up to this? So you got the training camp, and then you've got the week right before the fights, the weigh-ins, and then, backstage before you're about to go out, the walk out to the arena, and what is that energy like as you move through that?
The beginning part is pretty much, once you're in the back, you're kind of somewhat sheltered, but you can hear the fights going on, and you're watching the fights in the back on big screens that are in the rooms. And each fighter has their own little different way of warming up. Some of them, like Sean, had to warm up a lot because he was an endurance guy. So you're just training pretty rigorously back there. Some guys are are a little bit more calm, and they just watch things, and people are talking, and everybody's just kind of gabbing. Everybody's trying to do anything but get too energized before the fight. So it's like you're trying to just watch the fights and relax and just kind of talk to everybody. And at that level, most everybody knows everybody. So you're just kind of talking to the people in your locker room and seeing how everything's going. But then as you start getting to the point where it's like, okay, you're on deck. Now things start amping up. Now it's like the fighter starts moving, and some of them, like Jacob Volkman, who was a 3-time All-American in wrestling, he would start going right through his NCAA wrestling mentality, doing the exact same move. You might as well have been watching a wrestler warm up, because that's what he knew to perform at the highest level in front of thousands of people. Brock was like normal, because fighting in front of 30,000, 40,000 people was like a 30,000, 40,000 drop, because he would fight in front of 70,000 people in giant stadiums. And so he was so used to that crowd that he would try to amp it up when he'd get out there. His whole thing, he wanted to have that. Whereas Sean was a very reserved guy. He just would be in his own little thing, listen to his headphones, trying to zone out everything. And then when we start walking out to the cage, that's when things start to erupt, and each fighter, deals with that in different ways. And, obviously at that point, Sean had quite a bit of experience, so he would, work through it different ways. Other fighters, would feed off it and get energized as they're walking up to that cage. And you're just trying to kind of mirror what the fighter needs, right? If he's one of those guys that's real mellow, you got to just be mellow and try to absorb the energy and just walk away and act like nothing's affecting you. If it's like he wants it amped, so you're just like, okay, here he is, let's go. And so you're kind of mirroring the fighter, what their attitude is.
Yeah, obviously
it's wild.
Oh yeah, it's nothing like you've done, obviously. But I've done some of the local shows where some of my guys have fought like reality fighting with Kip Kohler and those guys, and I'll walk them out to and I'm nervous, and I'm not even the one fighting. But a lot of times they say they don't even feel nervous. And
it's, I think as a fighter, that, what you're doing is in your hands. When you're in a corner, it's not in your hands. You're watching it and you're just like, and you're seeing them and you're like, that's not what we planned. No. Sometimes it's so funny and certain guys I would use because, my voice would not boom enough. So I would yell the instruction to one guy and he would be like, you gotta go. And his voice would boom out. So I'd be yelling to him. He'd be yelling into the cage. And, and so we'd always have a pretty good system when we did stuff. And different fighters I could be very direct with. I had one fighter in Muay Thai, and he also fought in Shudo in Japan. But I basically had 3 commands: hands, leg, there it is, right? Because when I said hands, that meant boxing was open, right? When I said leg, they would always assume leg kick, but that meant a kick was open. It could be to his head, could be the body, could be anywhere. That means kick. And then there it is was he had a really good low kick and fake head kick. He knocked out a lot of people with that. And so I would see the guy that he's fighting, his hands start to come in a little bit. And as soon as I saw the back of his head open, I would go, there it is. And sometimes you could see he would set it up, and then he'd come back to the corner. He said, okay, I see it. I'm going to take it this round. And he'd go out there, he'd set it up, all of a sudden, low, high, bam, head kick. So, and it's all I needed because we had such a good rapport back and forth. And because I hear sometimes, you're in the corner and you're hearing some corners like trying to, point by point, walk a guy through moves, right? It's like, you know what he's hearing in there? Charlie Brown's teacher.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Right, your leg. No, you're on the left leg. Grab with your hand. It's like, the guy's not hearing that, So if you're got 1 or 2 things that you can yell, that's the key. And then when you get in the corner, then I'm usually, for about the first 30 seconds or half of that minute, I'm just saying, breathe. Just breathe. Once I see their eyes kind of clear out, like, okay, now they're back, then I'll give them 1 or 2 things, and that's it. It's like, okay, and then I have a guy in the back. We kind of coordinate. One guy is going to tell them about going to be more striking. I'll be more grappling, or vice versa. And so he'll give him his one thing, and I'll give him my one or two things, and back out. So
It's interesting you say that. After this past weekend, it was Anthony Smith fighting, and they said like the first round and a half, they had called everything out the corner. Everything they called out, and he burnt himself out basically.
Yeah.
And then that's when the fight went really downhill for him.
yeah,
Are you a big fight fan still? Do you watch the UFC? And
I don't watch as many of that are out there. I can tell you that. But there's just
too many.
Yeah, but I watch it. Yeah, there's certain fighters that I watch that are going to be more, related to the fighters that I got right now that may eventually fight in that weight class. So I look at certain fights and who's fighting, and then I'll watch it. Or if someone from a certain training camp that I know really well, then I'll watch the fight and kind of see what's going on, because I talk to some of the trainers and work with them and have co-cornered with them at UFCs. And so that's kind of cool when I have a fighter that, like Rose Yamanunas, she will train with me, but she also lives in Colorado. So she works with the guys there, so a lot of the striking, a lot of stuff is done there. And then she comes up and does a lot of wrestling and the grappling here, but she also has a grappling coach. So we'll be talking back and forth and have a pretty good game plan. And so then we'll co-corner. So it's really cool because I've known those guys for sometimes cornering against them in the UFC back in the day, because after enough fights, you're going to be cornering against people, and then you're sharing a corner with them. I've done that with a few corners.
Well, that's Rose's Pat Barry's wife, right?
Yes.
Now he went out kind of early.
Yeah, he was more of a kickboxer, very good kickboxer, trained in Holland, lived in Holland, and that's just hardcore that's just brutal in Holland, right?
He was a beast.
Yeah, just kicks still, and he's so flexible. And he's a unique guy because as hard and as brutal as his strikes were, when they lived in Minnesota, I could put him in the class of beginner sparring. No one would ever get hurt, ever. He was so controlled, and I remember when he fought Stefan Struve, who's like, 6'10"? So we had this really tall guy who was probably 6'8", but about as far from a fighter as you're ever going to get. And Pat would go, "Hey, you think that guy would want to spar?" I go, "Pat, dude, that guy's no, he's not a fighter." He goes, "I don't need a fighter. I just need a target that I can look at." And so by the time the sparring sessions would get over, he would tell the guy, "You can hit me as hard as you want. That's okay." And then the guy started to realize, "Oh, I'm not getting hurt." So he'd be walking around like, "Yeah, I'm Pat Barry's sparring partner." But Pat just needed something to look at, and he wouldn't really hit him, but he just tap, 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 tap. So it was great. It benefited both guys.
Fantastic. Now, with all the martial arts you've trained over your 40 plus years, do you have a favorite? I know that's a tough question, but do you have the one that you wouldn't want to let go of?
I mean, that is a tough one, because I really do train many of them equally. I'm a wrestling coach. I coach high school wrestling, so I've never stopped wrestling. And our jiu-jitsu really blends the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu together. So we have a mentality that, and I got guys that are really good off their guard and aren't wrestlers for sure, but we really blend the two. We do a lot of our goes start up on the feet, takedowns, and even when we're not going live, someone's going to take somebody down, and then the go starts there. And we always start in a position that would usually happen if you got taken down, right? So we don't start on our knees. It's like nobody starts a fight on their knees unless you're with your brother, right? But so someone's going to start in a position either on their back or on the guard, or someone's over the top, or some position. And so,
what about grappling? How about grappling versus striking? Do you see at some point where more of a grappling? Or
the grappling is definitely, you have more longevity. You can stay on the mat forever, right? Mm-hmm. Striking, that's harder on your joints. You know, I mean, even when, I mean, I still train it, and I still do a lot of striking, but I'm not, you know, hard sparring anymore. You know, I do, you know, I'll do bag work, but did it for so long where you're smashing. I do a lot more where, you know, you're doing glove drills or drills with your partner where you're shooting. Well, we used to. And, but, you know, definitely there's more of a time limit on your joints for striking, right? Because it's just that jarring factor. But what I've done to kind of mitigate that is I never stopped doing the Filipino martial arts with all the carenza and the really fluid movements, which for a person that's grappled and, you know, wrestled and jiu-jitsu and Shudo and Thai boxing and, you know, competed in all those different areas, my shoulders, my elbows, my wrist, nothing, not an issue. And I would tell people I believe it's from all the fluid weaponry work, because you're always doing these nice circular motions with the weapons. And so to me, that's part of the package, right? But I would say that in the twilight of my life, when things start to dwindle down, I'll probably be left with more jiu-jitsu and fluidity with the weapons.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. I got one more question for you.
Yes.
So you obviously train a lot of diversity of people, from regular, average Joes to fighters to law enforcement to special forces type people. What kind of a mindset do you have? Is it kind of the same to a degree for all of them, or do you have a much different mindset teaching each one?
There's a different mindset, because you have, you know, obviously law enforcement, you guys have a force continuum, you know, because whereas like if you're working with some of the units of the military, you know, they don't have that same issue, right? So you can, like, especially if you're working with like the tier 1 guys, they have kind of two things. Either they're trying to get somebody or they're trying to eliminate people. There's not, and so when they're trying to get somebody, then they have to, it's a different kind of a battle, right? Because they just can't go in there and shoot everybody. It's really a methodical, you know, it's crazy how high level those guys are. And, you know, training with those guys, they'll have like a picture of the guy on the chest, and they have to go into a room full out and be able to pick out that picture that's on the chest and take everybody else out, keep that person. And so that's a different, you know, mentality, right? Mm-hmm. And at that point too, those guys are just, it's almost like eugenics gone perfect. You know, they're just like really athletic. They're super smart, speak languages, they do all this stuff, and they're willing to do stuff over and over and over and over, right? And then law enforcement sometimes, and you know, man, you go into a room training, it's like half the people don't even want to be there. Mm-hmm. It's like, this is unbelievable. You guys actually are the people that have to fight if it comes down to it, and you don't want to train it? To me, that's insane.
It's been so frustrating for me over the last 23 years. Is, you know, it's different, I guess. If you're teaching like an in-service class to people in your own agency, you might as well be anybody else, because they don't, oh, it's just Rob. Yeah. But that can go to another agency, they take you more seriously. And if you go out of state or out of country, well, you must be important, you must be God. You know, they treat you differently. But yeah, in your own house, you're not the king.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It's very weird. And then now I work with different, I worked a bunch with the federal air marshals, and they have a totally different mindset, because they have to deal with fighting inside the confines of a plane. And so we would set up all these things, and they have mock airplanes, and we're working in. And so everything has to be very linear. And, you know, you can use the seats to maybe trip the person over, but there's a lot of snap downs and a lot of, you know, you can't do round kicks because a lot of times you're in a plane. So it's a lot of foot jabs and being able to control and snap. And so it's a different, and we also did a lot of training with them, because this is really right after the whole 9/11 stuff, when they kind of reinstituted everything. but they were doing when they were in a seat and someone would come up behind, how to deal with that, the blade and trapping it with your arm and being able to not be killed so you could fight.
Yep.
And so there was a lot of that going on, which was really unique because it was like a problem solving, because they'd say, well, what if this happens? Okay, let's figure it out. And a lot of those guys are pretty high speed. You know, a lot of them that I worked with are ex-SEAL team guys that went to air marshals. And so they already had such a different, level of skill. And so now it was just like they were, in a new environment, figuring out how to navigate through it. So they were really, really cool to work with. And then I worked a lot with in the area with them in Minneapolis, the FBI here, and their SWAT teams and different units here. And again, that was a different level of guy. There's really one of them was a HRT guy, so that was like really high level. I mean, that guy was just like super cool to work with. And then, but a lot of them, then you're working with people that are like fraud department. You're like, has this guy ever gotten out of the chair? so he was trying to figure out stuff, and it was just funny. So you're working at different levels of law enforcement, and depending on, like you said, there's some groups that it's like you just were dropped into the golden cop group. This guy, they all want to train. This is unbelievable. And they go, well, yeah, we got the guys that wanted to train. None of the other guys wanted to come. And I'm like, yeah, but really? Yeah, to me, that it's really unusual.
But I did a class for it was a counter-terrorist unit in Virginia-based area for Amtrak. It was basically they were supposed to do what HRT did for planes. They were supposed to do them on trains.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going there, and it was held at this place called the Crucible. Was the name of the training place. And I remember getting there, and the person organizing it's like, hey, if anybody doesn't make it this week through training, just let us know, and we don't expect everybody to pass. That's super unusual. Usually they're like, oh, they want you to make sure everybody's going to get through this. And then I remember him saying, oh yeah, no one should get hurt. I got good ways of training. I'll do my best. The guy, I remember he looked at me and he said, if nobody gets hurt, the training sucked. That's what he said. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a different group. He says, you can basically do anything to these guys you want.
Yeah.
Anything you want. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting way, because I never heard that before in any kind of law enforcement training. They're always concerned about someone getting hurt.
Yeah. And it's kind of unique because even working with like some of the tier 1 guys, I remember we were training down at Fort Bragg, and they were doing live takedowns, and the guy blew his knee out. And that was before I got there, so they said no takedowns. Because you're dealing with the $20 million man now.
Yeah, and if they're hurt now, their team's missing that guy, which I thought it was super weird that they said that, but they were very much like that. They're like, hey, if it's not tough, if everybody makes it, it wasn't hard enough.
Yeah, and then like working with like dev group guys, they're a little bit. That was a little bit wilder. They wanted to do a lot of fighting, a lot of wrestling type stuff, and a lot of action, and so that was cool. And then I worked with the Secret Service too, and they were very that was they had very specific questions, because what they got to do and what they're doing with. And that was kind of fun because they brought me to their little mock city that they have, Judgment Lane and all this, and you go to the shooting course, and they got those big screens, right? And why didn't you shoot that guy? I don't know. Well, you should have. So it's like, okay.
You ever been to Hogan's Alley at Quantico?
No.
No, yeah, that's similar. They got like a big city set up with all like the stores and everything else to make it look like a real place.
Yeah,
pretty cool.
Yeah, that was neat. That was really fun, and then they brought us to their driving course, and that was insane. I was just like, geez, these guys can drive. Oh my gosh. Yeah, and then the limousine. It was like, it's just like a big rolling missile.
Mm-hmm.
The doors, like one door is 600 pounds, and the windows are, they're like 8 inches thick. And it's like, well, what do you do? How do you steer this? They go, we don't. We go through things.
Well, I got to tell you, Greg, it was an honor to talk with you. I know that a lot of times you go down to Professor Sauer's in Virginia once a year for a camp. Hopefully this straightens out and we're able to do some of those camps again. I'd love to see you again down there.
Definitely. That's great.
Say hi to my buddy Andy Graham.
Yeah, Andy.
Yeah, I was there when he got his black belt. I rolled with him a bunch. Great guy.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. That's it. Yeah, he's the rock. He's one of the rocks that was there. And he's basically, like I tell people, you know, he does everything that I'd never want to do, and he does it really well. He's like a bulldog, you know. Once he gets on something, that's it. I mean, man, he is indispensable for me. I can tell you that. So Andy's great.
I have one last question.
Yes.
So I'm a geek with the UFC. I love watching it. I've watched it for years and years and years. Jacob Volkman.
Yes.
How did he get the nickname Christmas?
Okay, this is great. That was Brock Lesnar. But so if you know Lloyd Christmas from Dumb and Dumber, the haircut, that's it. And that's what it was. And Brock goes, dude, you look like Lloyd Christmas. That's your name, Christmas. And that was it. Jacob Christmas.
No one's going to argue with Brock.
Nope. And so there it is. But I'll tell you this. Jacob Volkman is physically the strongest person you'll ever touch in your life at that size. It's unbelievable. I mean,
It was a lot of fun to watch. A lot of fun to watch.
And man, he's very smart. He's like I think graduated honors in like geophysics and geology, and we'd be like flying on the plane, getting ready, going to the UFC, and he'd have his coins out and his little monocle thing, looking at it, and I go, God, you are such a nerd. And he'd be like, just looking, but he grew up on a pig farm. So all his life has just been hauling rocks and fighting pigs. And she goes, he always just say, there ain't no man as strong as a pissed off pig. And I tell you, he is so physically strong that when he was at with the Gophers, they would have him wrestle the heavyweights and he wrestled 165, but he could wrestle those guys because he was strong enough. And that was no easy task, because that was Cole Conrad, who was, fourth, second, first, wasn't beaten in the last 76 matches of his college career, heavyweight. And so he would be wrestling him. And I always just tell people, I go, I'm pretty sure Volkman might be a vampire, because, I mean, how strong he is. And he's like, it's really funny how you get these different people. And he's the guy, of course, that challenged Obama, right? I don't know if you know that. And so the Secret Service came, and it was like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. And they were even like, yeah, well, it was kind of even though it was a joke, but it was like, oh my gosh. And that was like a whole. So I remember I going like this, I go, okay, next time I don't want you to say anything about Obama. Say anything about anybody else, but not Obama. But it was like, he gets done with his interview, and then Joe Rogan goes, anything else? And I just went, oh. He goes, yeah, I got something else. And that's when he brought out his joke. He goes, you know what a glassectomy is? That's what Obama needs. And Joe Rogan goes, well, what's that? He goes, well, you take out your belly button, you put a glass in there, so when your head's up your ass, you know what you're doing. You know where you're going. And it was like crickets, right? Because of the way he delivered it. And he's like, freaking Joe Rogan ruined my joke. I go, no, the fact is that the audience wasn't a bunch of grade school kids and seventh graders. But he would say whatever he wanted. And oh my God, Dana was mad. And he's just like, what are you talking about? You can say anything else, but you can't say that. And he's kind of like one of those guys, right? But yeah, he was another fun guy to be around, just because he was so great wrestler. He beat Tyrone Woodley in wrestling. He beat Rashad Evans in wrestling. I mean,
wow.
Those guys would be like, oh yeah, the first time we saw him, we're like, look at this guy. What, did he get his hair cut with a bowl? And all of a sudden they go, oh! And they said it was the strongest guy we ever touched in our life. I go, yeah, that's Volkman. Yeah, so pretty funny.
That's awesome.
Thank you very much, sir. And stay healthy, stay safe. I hope your school gets opened sooner than later. Ours is still shut as well. So
yep.
thank you very much for coming on.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks for being patient.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you.
Yes, and you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great night.